The Zephyrian Council chamber floated deep beneath the crystal waters of their home world. Elder Vexhai moved through the clear blue liquid with slow, graceful movements. Her 8 tentacles rippled as she swam toward the great viewing sphere. At the center of the chamber, inside the sphere, holographic images showed the latest reports from across their territory. The news was terrible. Another 3 colonies had fallen to the Korthic Empire in just 2 days. The reptilian warriors had swept through the peaceful settlements like a storm of death and fire. Millions of Zephyrians were now slaves, forced to work in the deep mines of distant worlds. Vexhai's large, dark eyes filled with sadness as she watched the recordings. Korthic soldiers, each one twice the height of a Zephyrian, dragged families from their homes. Their ships, massive and black like spaceborne mountains, hung over burning cities. The Korthic had no mercy. They took everything and left nothing. But Ash, Elder Vexhai, called a younger voice from across the chamber. Counselor Remka swam forward, his blue skin pale with fear. The Outer Rim colonies are asking for permission to surrender. They say resistance is hopeless. Vexhai closed her eyes and let herself sink toward the chamber floor. Her people had never known war before the Korthic came. For thousands of years, the Zephyrians had lived in peace. They spent their time healing the sick, studying the stars, and creating beautiful art. Their greatest invention was the regeneration chambers that could heal any wound and extend life for centuries. Other races across the galaxy came to them for healing. The proud Altarians brought their wounded warriors. The wise Centauri sent their scholars to learn. Even the mysterious energy beings from the Outer Rim sought Zephyrian medical knowledge. Everyone knew that if you were hurt or dying, the Zephyrians could save you, but they had never built weapons. They had no armies. Their ships were designed for exploration and medical missions, not war. When the Korthic Empire began expanding into their space 3 years ago, the Zephyrians had tried talking. They offered free medical treatment for all Korthic citizens. They'd promised to share their healing technology. War Master Graxus had laughed at their offer. He said weak species existed only to serve the strong. Then he had ordered his fleets to attack. "How many worlds have we lost now?" Vexhai asked quietly. 47 colonies, Remka replied. "Nearly 100 million of our people are in Korthak slave camps. Their ships are moving toward the core worlds. At this rate, they will reach our home system within 6 months." Vexhai swam to another viewing sphere that showed their military situation. It was hopeless. The Zephyrians had 12 small defense ships, armed only with mining lasers and rescue equipment. The Korthak had over 300 warships each, one built for destruction. Their smallest fighters could destroy a Zephyrian city with a single blast. "Have we received any responses to our requests for help?" she asked. Remka's tentacles drooped with disappointment. "The Galactic Council sends their sympathy, but they will not act. They say the Korthic Empire has not violated any major trade. Roots, the Altarian Republic, is fighting its own border wars. The Centauri Union says military intervention would upset the balance of power." Vexhai felt anger, an emotion her people rarely experienced. The galaxy was full of powerful civilizations with great fleets and terrible weapons, but none of them would help when the Korthak enslaved peaceful worlds. They only cared about their own interests. "Elder," said another counselor, swimming up from the lower levels of the chamber, "there is one more option. The emergency protocols mention a final option for species facing extinction. The Deep Space Distress Call," Vexhai whispered. She had heard of it but hoped never to use it. The ancient communication system could send a message across the entire galaxy, reaching even the unknown regions where no civilized species traveled. "If we activate it, every spacefaring race will hear our plea," the counselor continued. "We can offer our greatest treasure in exchange for military protection." Vexhai knew what he meant. The secret of regenerative medicine was worth more than all the gold and diamonds in the galaxy. Any species that possessed it could make their people nearly immortal. It was knowledge that could change the fate of entire civilizations. "But if we give that away," Remka said nervously, "we lose our most valuable asset. What happens to us after the fighting ends?" What happens to us if there is no fighting? Vexhai replied. If the Korthik take our homeworld, our knowledge dies with us anyway. At least this way, we might survive as a people. She swam to the center of the chamber and activated the ancient controls. The water around her began to glow with soft light as the deep space transmitters charged up. This system had not been used for over 1,000 years. Record the message, she ordered. The chamber filled with recording light. Vexhai composed herself and began to speak in the common galactic language that all spacefaring species understood. This is Elder Vexhai of the Zephyrian Council, speaking for all the peaceful worlds of our territory. We face total extinction at the hands of the Korthik Empire. Our colonies are falling one by one. Our people are enslaved. We have no weapons to defend ourselves and no allies willing to help. She paused, knowing that the next words would change everything. We offer the complete secrets of regenerative medicine to any military force that will protect our people. This knowledge can heal any wound, cure any disease, and extend life indefinitely. We ask only for the right to exist in peace. The message was complete. Vexhai gave the order to transmit it across all known frequencies, broadcasting it to every corner of the galaxy. In the quiet hours that followed, the Zephyrian leaders waited for responses. They received messages of sympathy but no offers of real help. The great civilizations were too busy with their own problems to save a dying race, but far away, in a part of space marked with warnings about dangerous worlds and primitive species, something heard the call. On the third moon of a small blue planet, Admiral Jake Morrison read the translated message with great interest. The humans had been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. Earth hung in the darkness like a blue jewel, peaceful and beautiful. But Jake knew better than anyone how dangerous the small planet really was. The communication officer, Lieutenant Amy Brooks, hurried across the metal floor with a data pad in her hands. Her face showed excitement mixed with worry. "Sir, we have something big," she said, handing him the device. The deep space arrays picked up a distress call. It came from way outside our sector, from a species called the Zephyrians. Jake read the message carefully. His weathered face remained calm, but his eyes grew sharp with interest. After 30 years in the military, he knew an opportunity when he saw one. Regenerative medicine, he said quietly. Technology that can make people live forever. Yes, sir, Amy replied. Our scientists say it could change everything. No more. The death from old age or disease. But, sir, there's something else. The message was broadcast on all frequencies. The whole galaxy heard it. Jake nodded slowly. He walked to his desk and activated the secure communication system. Within minutes, the faces of his senior staff appeared on screens around the room. People, we have a situation, he began. A peaceful alien race is being wiped out by an empire called the Korthak. They're offering their most valuable technology to whoever saves them. General Patricia Wells, commander of Earth's ground forces, leaned forward on her screen. What's the catch, Jake? Nobody gives away something that valuable unless they're desperate. The catch is that we'll be going up against an entire empire. According to our intelligence, the Korthak have been conquering worlds for decades. They have hundreds of warships and millions of soldiers. Captain Lisa Hayes spoke up from her ship in orbit. Sir, what about the other galactic powers? Won't they respond to this call too? Jake smiled grimly. That's where it gets interesting. Our spy satellites have been monitoring galactic communications for years. The major civilizations are all sending sympathy messages, but nobody wants to actually fight. They're all afraid of starting a bigger war. He pulled up a star map showing the known galaxy. Most of it was colored in different shades, representing various alien empires and federations. But one small section in the outer rim was marked in red with warning symbols. For 50 years, we've been stuck in this quarantine zone, Jake continued. The aliens found Earth back in 2175 and decided we were too dangerous to let loose in the galaxy. They called us Deathworlders and built sensor stations to keep us contained. Commander Dan Fisher, head of space tactics, laughed harshly. 2. Dangerous, right, we should take that as a compliment. The point is, Jake said, we've been preparing for this moment for decades. While they've been living in peace, we've been building the most advanced military in the galaxy. We have weapons they've never seen and tactics they can't imagine. He activated another display showing the Earth Space Navy fleet. 62 warships hung in formation around Earth and Luna, unlike the smooth, artistic vessels of other species. Human ships looked like what they were, instruments of war. They were covered in armor plating, bristling with weapon systems, and designed for one purpose only. The Zephyrians are offering their medical technology to whoever saves them, Jake said, but I think we can do better than that. This could be our chance to break out of quarantine and take our place in the galaxy. General Wells raised an eyebrow. You're talking about more than just a rescue mission. I'm talking about showing the galaxy what happens when you mess with species under human protection, Jake replied. The Korthic Empire thinks they're apex. Predators, it's time they met the real thing. Captain Hayes pulled up tactical data on her screen. Admiral, I've been studying the intelligence reports on Korthak military doctrine. They rely on intimidation and brute force. Their ships are big but slow. Their tactics haven't changed in centuries. What about their numbers? Don asked. Even with our advantages, they outnumber us 5-1. Jake walked back to the viewing window and looked out at Earth. Don, what's the first rule of human warfare? It's not about the size of the army, Dan recited. It's about how you use it. Exactly. The Korthak have been fighting civilized species who follow rules and try to minimize casualties. They've never faced an enemy that fights to win at any cost. Admiral Morrison activated the fleet communication system. All across Earth's orbital space, ship captains received the same message. Prepare for immediate deployment. Captain Hayes felt her heart race as she read the orders. The UESS Vengeance, her command, was a heavy cruiser armed with the newest human weapons. Railguns that could fire solid rounds at 30% light speed, plasma cannons that burned hotter than stars, and nuclear missiles that could crack a moon in half, but the real advantage wasn't the weapons. It was the crew. Every human on these ships had grown up on a world where everything tried to kill them. They understood survival in ways that peaceful aliens never could. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, came the voice over the comm system. We are departing in 6 hours for the Zephyrian system. Our mission is to destroy the Korthic forces and establish human presence in that sector. Remember, the galaxy has been watching us for 50 years, waiting to see what we would do when we finally got loose. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of humanity's long frustration. Let's show them. Across the fleet, human crews began final preparations. Engineers checked weapon systems that had never been tested in real combat. Pilots ran simulations against Korthak fighter designs. Marines loaded equipment for boarding actions that would terrify any civilized species. Captain Hayes stood on her bridge, watching the stars. In 18 hours, they would drop out of hyperspace in an alien system and face an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. The Korthic expected to fight another peaceful species with outdated weapons and gentle tactics. Instead, they were about to meet Earth's children. And Earth's children had been preparing for war their entire lives. War Master Graxus stood 8 feet tall on the command deck of his flagship, the Bone Crusher. His thick reptilian skin was covered in battle scars that told the story of 40 years of conquest. Each scar was a trophy, a reminder of another world that had fallen to Korthic might. The massive ship hung in space above the burning ruins of New Zephyria, the latest colony to surrender to his forces. Smoke rose from the underwater cities as his soldiers rounded up the surviving aliens for transport to the slave camps. It had been an easy victory like all the others. War Master, called his communications officer, a younger Korthic with bright green scales. Our scouts report unknown ships approaching from the outer system. Graxus turned his massive head toward the tactical display. 57 ships had appeared at the edge of scanner range, moving in tight formation toward the Zephyrian homeworld. They looked small compared to his fleet of 200 vessels. "Mercenaries," he growled with amusement. "The fish people must be more desperate than I thought." His intelligence officer, Captain Vorth, studied the readings with confusion. "War Master, these ships are strange. They do not match any known design in our databases. The hulls appear to be covered in primitive armor plating instead of energy shields." Graxus laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. "Primitives with metal hulls, how amusing. Perhaps they are from one of the outer rim worlds, trying to play soldier." The unknown fleet continued its approach, moving with purpose but no apparent fear. This puzzled Graxus. Most species turned and ran when they saw the full might of a Korthic battle fleet. These strangers seemed to be coming straight for them. "Open communications," he ordered. "Let us see what these fools want." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of one of the alien ships. Graxus stared at the creature that appeared before him. It was small, barely half his height, with pale pink skin and strange hair covering the top of its head. Its eyes were a bright blue color that seemed to glow with inner fire. "This is Captain Lisa Hayes of the United Earth Space Navy," the creature said in perfect Korthic language. "You have 30 seconds to withdraw from Zephyrian space before we open fire." The entire bridge erupted in harsh laughter. Graxus could not believe what he was hearing. This tiny creature was threatening him? Him, the conqueror of 47 worlds? "Little animal," he snarled, leaning forward to show his razor-sharp teeth. "Do you know who you are speaking to? I am War Master Graxus of the Korthic Empire. My fleet has crushed every enemy that dared to face us. We have turned entire worlds into ash and glass." The human female's expression did not change. Her eyes remained calm and cold as winter ice. 20 seconds. "You command 57 tiny ships," Graxus continued, enjoying the moment. "I have 200 vessels, each one larger than your biggest ship. My warriors are bred for war from the moment they hatch. We have weapons that can crack planets open like eggs." He gestured to the burning world below them. "Look at what we did to this colony in just 6 hours. Your pathetic fleet would not last 6 minutes against us." The human checked something on a screen that Graxus could not see, then looked back at him with those strange, bright eyes. 10 seconds. "You are either very brave or very stupid," Graxus said, his amusement growing. "But I admire courage, even in doomed prey. Surrender now, and I might let some of your people live as slaves? Refuse, and I will turn your ships into scrap metal and your crews into space dust." Captain Hayes touched a control panel, and Graxus heard her speaking to someone off-screen. "All ships, weapons free. Target their command vessel first." Graxus roared with laughter. "Command vessel? This ship alone masses more than your entire fleet. What could you possibly do to the Bone Crusher?" The human looked directly at him with those cold, predator eyes that made something deep in his brain feel uneasy. "We're about to find out. Time's up." The screen went dark just as proximity alarms began screaming throughout the Korthak flagship. The first thing Graxus noticed was that his sensors had lost track of most of the human ships. They had been there one moment, gone the next. Where did they go? He bellowed at his sensor operator. "Unknown, War Master. They appear to be using some kind of stealth technology. Our targeting computers cannot lock onto them." The second thing Graxus noticed was the sound of his escort ships exploding through the viewport. He watched 3 Korthak cruisers simply vanish in brilliant flashes of light. No beam weapons, no plasma bolts, no energy signatures at all. 1 second the ships were there, the next they were expanding clouds of superheated gas. What weapon was that? He demanded. "Kinetic projectiles, War Master," his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Solid metal slugs moving at 30% light speed. Our shields had no effect at all." A chill ran down Graxus's spine. Kinetic weapons were crude and primitive, the kind of thing that barbaric species used before they learned about energy shields. But these projectiles were moving faster than anything he had ever seen. "Return fire," he roared. Destroy them all. But his gunners were having problems. The human ships appeared on sensors for brief moments, fired their weapons, then disappeared again. They were using electronic warfare techniques that confused Korthic targeting systems, making them appear to be in multiple places at once. More explosions lit up the darkness as human missiles found their targets. These were not the clean energy weapons of civilized warfare. They were crude nuclear devices that tore through Korthak hulls like paper and filled space with deadly radiation. The third shock came when the human fighters arrived. Graxus watched in horror as small, fast ships swarmed around his vessels like angry insects. But these pilots fought like madmen, using tactics that no sane being would attempt. One human fighter, damaged and leaking atmosphere, deliberately crashed into a Korthic destroyer. The pilot could have ejected safely, but instead chose to turn his ship into a guided missile. The explosion crippled the much larger vessel. "War Master!" His communications officer called out in panic. "We are receiving surrender demands from the other human ships. They say we have one chance to withdraw or they will destroy the entire fleet." Graxus stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. In less than 20 minutes, these primitive aliens had destroyed or disabled 36 of his ships. His mighty war fleet, the terror of a dozen star systems, was being torn apart by a force one-fourth its size. For the first time in his long career, War Master Graxus began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. These were not civilized beings who fought by rules and tried to minimize casualties. These were predators who fought to kill, and they were very, very good at it. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the Korthic fleet try to regroup after their first taste of human warfare. Her tactical officer, Commander Dan Fisher, was calling out target updates as fast as his computers could process them. 18 more enemy ships disabled, Captain, Don reported. Their formation is breaking apart. They're trying to scatter. Lisa nodded calmly. This was exactly what Admiral Morrison had predicted. The Korthic had spent centuries fighting civilized species who followed rules and tried to avoid unnecessary destruction. They had no idea how to deal with an enemy that fought like Earth's children. "Launch the second wave of fighters," she ordered. "Tell Lieutenant Pete Carson to show them what human pilots can really do." In the fighter bay of the carrier ship, UES Fury, Pete Carson strapped himself into the cockpit of his F-99 Raptor. The small ship was built for speed and maneuverability, not comfort. Every surface was covered with weapons, sensors, and armor. Plating. It looked like a mechanical shark, sleek and deadly. Pete had grown up on Mars, where the thin atmosphere and low gravity had made him naturally suited for high-speed flight. He had trained for 15 years to reach this moment. Around him, 43 other human pilots were doing the same final checks. "All right, people," came the voice of squadron leader Karen right over the comm. "The big lizards think they know how to fight. Let's teach them the difference between hunting prey and facing predators." The fighter bay doors opened and the human pilots launched into space like bullets from a gun. Pete immediately locked onto 3 Korthic fighters that were trying to regroup near their mothership. The alien pilots were flying in perfect formation, following attack patterns that had worked for 1,000 years. Pete smiled grimly and broke every rule of civilized air combat. Instead of engaging at long range with energy weapons, he accelerated directly toward the enemy fighters at maximum speed. The Korthic pilots, confused by this suicidal approach, tried to scatter. But Pete was already inside their formation, firing his railguns at point-blank range. The first Korthic fighter exploded into pieces. The second tried to turn away, but Pete followed it into a spiral dive that would have killed most alien pilots from the G-forces alone. His third target attempted to ram him, thinking the human would flinch away from collision. Pete did not flinch. At the last second, he rolled his ship and fired his engines, using the Korthic fighter's own momentum to tear its wing off. The alien ship spun out of control and crashed into an asteroid across the battlefield. Similar scenes were playing out as human pilots demonstrated why Earth was considered a death world. They used their own ships as weapons, ramming enemy vessels. When their ammunition ran low, they flew through radiation fields and asteroid belts that would terrify sane beings. When their fighters were damaged beyond repair, they aimed them at enemy ships and ejected at the last possible moment. Back on the Bone Crusher, War Master Graxus watched his pilots being systematically destroyed by creatures that fought like demons. His tactical officer was reporting casualties in a shaking voice. War Master, we have lost 70% of our fighter wing. The enemy pilots are using kamikaze attacks. They show no regard for their own survival. Graxus slammed his massive fist on the command console. Impossible. No rational being fights like that? Sir, his intelligence officer said quietly, I don't think these beings are rational. Our xenobiology experts have been analyzing the enemy transmissions. These creatures come from a world with gravity twice our normal, an atmosphere that would poison most species, and predators that make our war beasts look like pets. The War Master stared at the tactical display as more of his ships disappeared from the screen. The human fleet was moving through his forces like a plague, destroying everything in their path with cold efficiency. What are their losses? He demanded. Minimal, sir. They have lost maybe 12 ships total. Their tactics are completely alien to us. They coordinate their attacks through quantum communication networks. They share targeting data instantly across their entire fleet. And their weapons. Another explosion rocked the Bone Crusher as a human missile penetrated their shields. These weapons were not the clean energy bolts that civilized species used. They were crude nuclear devices that filled space with radiation and debris, making it impossible for Korthuk sensors to function properly. War Master, the communications officer called out in panic. The humans are broadcasting a message on all frequencies. They're demanding our complete surrender? Graxus felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. His empire had conquered 47 worlds through superior firepower and ruthless tactics. But these humans were demonstrating levels of violence that made even Korthuk warriors look gentle. Put them on screen, he growled. Captain Hayes appeared again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood other human officers, their faces calm and cold as they watched the destruction of his fleet. There was something in their eyes that made Graxus's blood run cold. They were not angry or excited about the battle. They were simply doing a job like farmers harvesting crops. War Master Graxus, Captain Hayes said in perfect Korthuk, you now have a choice. Order your fleet to stand down immediately, or we will demonstrate what human weapons can really do. You cannot defeat the entire Korthuk Empire. Graxus snarled, trying to hide his growing terror. We have 300 more ships scattered across the galaxy. We know, Captain Hayes replied calmly. We've been tracking your ship movements for weeks. Admiral Morrison is already moving to intercept your other fleets. By the time this conversation ends, the Korthuk Empire will no longer exist as a military force. Graxus felt his world crumbling around him. How is this possible? You are primitives. Your ships are crude metal boxes. You're right, Captain Hayes agreed. We are primitives. We come from a world where everything tries to kill us from the moment we're born. We learn to fight by surviving against creatures that make your warriors look like house pets. You conquered peaceful species who had never known real war. She leaned forward and her blue eyes seemed to burn with inner fire. Congratulations. War Master, you've just met a species that was born for war, and we're very good at our job. The screen went dark, and alarms began screaming throughout the Korthuk flagship. Through the viewports, Graxus could see his mighty fleet burning in the darkness, torn apart by beings who fought like the legendary monsters from his people's oldest nightmares. For the first time in his life, War Master Graxus began to consider the possibility of surrender. 6 months had passed since the first human fleet arrived in Zephyrian space. Elder Vexhai floated in her chambers aboard the diplomatic vessel, reading the latest reports from across the galaxy. The changes were so dramatic that she could barely believe them. The Korthuk Empire was gone. Not defeated, not weakened, completely destroyed as a fighting force. Admiral Jake Morrison had kept his promise. Human fleets had hunted down every Korthic warship in the galaxy, destroying them one by one with ruthless efficiency. The reptilian warriors who had terrorized peaceful worlds for decades were now refugees, begging other species for shelter, but the humans had done something that surprised everyone, including Vex High. They had not enslaved the Korthic people, or taken their worlds for themselves. Instead, they had offered them a choice: join the new galactic order as equals, or remain isolated in their own territory under human supervision. Most Korthic colonies had chosen to join. After generations of military rule, they were eager to try a different way of life. The humans had established training programs to teach former Korthic soldiers how to build instead of destroy. Many were now working alongside their former enemies to rebuild the worlds they had damaged. Elder Vexhai looked up as Admiral Morrison entered her chambers. The human leader moved with quiet confidence, but she had learned to see the predator that lurked beneath his calm surface. Behind him walked Captain Lisa Hayes and several other human officers. Their presence filled the room with an energy that made the water itself seem to vibrate. Elder Vexhai, Admiral Morrison said with a respectful nod. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I know you have concerns about our proposal. She gestured toward the floating chairs that had been specially designed for human visitors. The Admiral and his officers settled themselves, looking slightly uncomfortable in the underwater environment. But they had made the effort to come to her world, which she appreciated. Your proposal is quite remarkable, Vexhai said carefully. You are offering to protect any world that requests it, with no payment except trade agreements and the right to establish military bases. That's correct, Morrison replied. We learned something important during our time in quarantine. The galaxy is full of species like yours, peaceful, advanced, and completely helpless when real predators come calling. The old system failed you. The Galactic Council sent sympathy messages while you were being enslaved. Captain Hayes leaned forward slightly. We're not interested in conquest or empire building, but we won't allow what happened to you to happen. To others, never again. Vexhai studied the human faces around her. In the months since their arrival, she had watched them work with a dedication that bordered on obsession. They had not only destroyed the Korthic military, but had systematically hunted down every pirate fleet, slave trader, and war profiteer in the known galaxy. The results were remarkable. Trade routes that had been dangerous for centuries were now safe. Peaceful species that had lived in fear were beginning to explore and expand again. The humans had accomplished in 6 months what the civilized galaxy had failed to do in 6 centuries. There are those who say you are simply replacing one empire with another, she said quietly. Admiral Morrison nodded. I'm sure there are. The Altarian Republic has been sending protests to anyone who will listen. They're upset that we've disrupted their carefully balanced system of controlled chaos. The Centauri Union is demanding that we submit to Galactic Council authority, Captain. Hayes added with a slight smile. They seem to think we need permission to exist. Vexhai had heard about these diplomatic tensions. The major galactic powers were discovering that humans did not ask for permission or wait for approval. They identified problems and solved them, regardless of political consequences. What happens if a species refuses your protection? She asked. Nothing, Morrison replied simply. We're not forcing anyone to accept our help. But we're also not going to stand by and watch genocides happen, because it might upset some trade agreement. Through the viewing windows of her chambers, Vexhai could see the human fleet maintaining position around the diplomatic vessel. Each ship was a masterpiece of military engineering, designed by a species that had turned warfare into an art form. But more frightening than their technology was their mindset. The humans approached conflict like a disease to be cured. They studied it, understood it, and then eliminated it with surgical precision. They showed no anger toward their enemies, no joy in victory. They simply did what needed to be done and moved on to the next problem. Elder, said one of her advisors, swimming up from the lower levels, we're receiving reports from the outer rim territories. 3 more species have requested human protection. The hegemony border conflicts have ended after just the rumor that human ships were coming. Admiral Morrison showed no surprise at this news. Word travels fast. Most problems solve themselves once people understand that there are consequences for aggressive behavior. Vexhai made her decision. She activated the recording system and spoke formally. The Zephyrian Council accepts the human proposal for mutual defense and trade cooperation. We agree to provide medical technology and research facilities in exchange for military protection and access to human scientific advances. Excellent, Morrison said, standing up. Captain Hayes will remain here to coordinate the establishment of our first deep space naval base. We'll also be sending engineering teams to help rebuild your damaged colonies. As the humans prepared to leave, Vexhai found herself thinking about the galaxy they were creating. It was not the peaceful paradise that her people had dreamed of, but it was something perhaps more valuable, a place where peaceful species could exist without fear. Admiral, she called out as he reached the door, there is something I must ask. Your people have shown remarkable restraint for such powerful warriors, but what happens when you face an enemy that cannot be reasoned with or reformed? Admiral Morrison paused and looked back at her with those calm predator eyes that had become so familiar. Elder, we are the children of Earth. We evolved on a world where survival required us to become the most dangerous species in existence. When we encounter something that truly cannot be reasoned with ... double quotes, he smiled slightly, but there was no warmth in it. We show them why the galaxy was afraid to let us out of our cage. After the humans left, Vexhai floated alone in her chambers, watching their ships prepare for departure to their next assignment. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was learning that the age of unchecked aggression was over. The apex predators had arrived, and they intended to stay. She found herself wondering if they had saved the galaxy or fundamentally changed it forever. Knowing humans, it was probably both.